So good afternoon, everybody. Let's just make sure I assume it works. I am Quentyn Taylor. I'm actually Head of Information Security at Canon Europe. And I'm not here to do a sales presentation. Nothing of what I'm going to talk about today is anything to do with sales. I don't get mandated on sales. What I want to talk today about is about printing and IoT and print security. And a lot of the things I'm going to talk about today exist across all of the manufacturers. So I'm kind of here as an ambassador for the print industry, if you will, rather than actually anything for any particular company. So I want to talk today about IoT and printing. And really, I like to call it the unloved elephant in the room because it's the one thing that all of you have got. It's the one bit of office IoT that every single one of you has in your office somewhere. I know we've all talked about paperless. Many, many times people have talked about paperless, and yet we all still have printers sitting in our office, and yet they're all sitting there, and for very good reasons, or very bad reasons, sometimes they're unsecured, and they're not looked after, and they're unloved. But why? And we'll come on to that in a minute. If you've got any questions, just stick your hand up. We can talk about questions at any time. But before we get on to office IoT, if you ask somebody on the street what do they mean by IoT, everyone seems to think that it's a brand new term, because we like to, that's humans, we like to say, oh, IoT's new. And we've got things from the smart cars, to the smart assistants, to smart heating and smart TVs. And these all come with security concerns and security issues. The smart assistants at the moment are having some issues at the moment where actually Amazon, for example, and Google are having some issues where people are talking about that it starts to record. So if I say, OK, Google, not a single person's phone bleep. That's really annoying. He should have started recording my thing. In testing in the office, in the Canon office, I managed to get 5 people's phones suddenly bleeping. Smart assistants, really, really good. If you're ever on a conference call, top tip, if you're bored on a conference call and someone goes to the toilet and everyone's working from home, start just going, Echo, Amazon, OK computer. These are all the wake words for Amazon. And see if you can make an order before they get back. And if you can't make an order because they've been sensible and turned off ordering, just set an alarm for like 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, because I'm childish. Yes, I did that on a conference call. It was very, very, very funny. Although really annoyingly, one of my colleagues on the conference call told the operations manager that that's what I'd done to his thing via direct message about 10 minutes afterwards, and he complained to me and said that's just being very puerile. But anyway, so this is what people start to think about. People think about the smart TVs and they think about the security issues, and we even had it the other day where Samsung actually announced that you should probably virus scan your smart TVs. I'm not entirely sure that that tweet or that bit of advice was met with, well, a lot of people actually said maybe you should just build them so they don't need virus scanning. But what we're getting here is these things are just becoming data gathering devices. And what's very interesting about these, and I'm going to contrast these with office IoT, is with all of the devices here, you don't actually own these devices, really. Yeah, sure. You own the piece of plastic and the piece of glass. You own the piece of plastic and the power cable. But you don't actually own the data. And that's the reason why they're so cheap. I mean, I bought an Amazon one, and now they're giving them away for free. The smart TV prices are going down. So they're offsetting the costs of these devices alongside the data they can get. That's the reason why smart TVs are so cheap these days, is because they can sell the data legitimately. You signed up to all those EULAs, which you did read before you clicked I accept to make your smart TV work. And so basically, they're offsetting the costs of all of these devices. But it's different when you move into the corporate environment, because IoT in really is nothing new. It's been in the office for absolutely years and years and years and years. But we just didn't call it IoT. And some dumb devices, in inverted commas, are becoming smart. So let's look at a bit of IoT in the office. So projectors or beamers or whatever, what do you call them here in Singapore? Projectors? Projectors, okay. Sorry, I often call them beamers because I lived in Holland for like 10 years and they always called them beamers over there. In England, a beamer is a BMW, but anyway, they call them beamers. So projectors or beamers or wherever you come from in the world, whatever you call them, they're all now, majority of them are wireless. And actually, that's really good. Because whenever I get my laptop, I need to plug into something. I'm often sitting there going, now, I've had this laptop for 4 years, and I still don't know which side the connectors are on. Anybody else have that problem? Where you just sit there randomly just going, where is it? You suddenly start to remember laptops, and you just go around the back and go, no, that was a laptop like 10 years ago. Anywho, so these things are actually quite useful. So network connections on them, so you can just project straight to them. Very, very useful. Your CCTV cameras. No one installs non-IoT CCTV cameras these days. And in actual fact, security issues abound with CCTV cameras. The Mirai botnet, Mirai 2, and everything else depended upon the CCTV cameras, because with these, you've got the perfect combination of IoT that's sitting high up on the side of a building that no one even cares that it exists up there, with large amounts of bandwidth. Because if you're streaming 4K or even on some other modern, or the real absolute bleeding edge CCTV cameras, sometimes even maybe even 8K, you've got to have insane amounts of bandwidth going to these things. You've got video conferencing systems that are sitting out there. And these are often just totally ignored. I'm old enough to remember when they were only really ISDN, and now obviously they're not. And of course you've got printers, and I'm going to come on to those in a minute. But what's interesting about all of these things here is everyone here, I'm presuming, has heard of shadow brokers. The group of people who allegedly tried to sell a large number of NSA exploits. Now what's interesting, what links shadow brokers to this is, so shadow brokers are the people who released the Eternal Blue exploit, the NSA exploit that was behind WannaCry and NotPetya, that did a lot of the heavy lifting in both of those two malware outbreaks, and Bad Rabbit as well. But if you remember, there's something else that what are they called? Shadow brokers people released. In their first ever release, they released a manifest, a shipping manifest, because their initial thing was that you could actually buy a subscription to their service, and if you did, they apparently would give you all these NSA exploits and bleed them out to you a few a month. Now, I read that shipping manifest. This was just a list of all the wares that they claimed to have, like a catalogue, if you will. And what was very interesting is projectors, CCTV, and video conferencing were all in their manifest. And why? Why does the NSA care about hacking these devices? Printers weren't, actually. I was really, really surprised. I thought they'd been in there. That was a bit annoying they weren't in there. They must have a list of printers. Must have been on another page. But why do they do it? Well, they had a whole section, a whole directory and all the different video conferencing equipment. And why do they care about VC equipment? Well, because VC equipment tends to be not run by IT, tends to sit there in a meeting room. By its very definition, it has a high-definition camera or some kind of camera. It also has some kind of audio, and it's connectable to the outside world, because, of course, your video conferencing system, you don't want to be running on an intranet. No, you have to be able to reach out over the net. So what better way of bugging systems than the video conferencing systems? But I digress, because I want to talk to you about printers. Because you might not have, well, you probably have CCTV, but you may not have some of these things. But I guarantee you've got printers in your office. And there's a problem with printers. And one of the problems with printers is a lot of people just don't know of the threats or the opportunities that these things can bring, because they're not perceived as being cool. Print vendors on occasion don't take CIs out to lunch, and they tend to, a lot of times printers sit not under IT, but they sit under facilities. I mean, quick show of hands here. Whose corporate printers sit under facilities and not IT? Oh, nobody. Brilliant. I love this audience. You're all good people. You can all stay. We like this. And because they've been in there for such a long time, and the feature sets have been changing over the time, people just don't understand the kind of things that they can now do. I mean, let's just look at this and talk about, are printers really IT equipment? Well, with a printer, you can scan to email. So great if you want to exfiltrate data out of a building. I'm fairly sure from when we saw your presentation about reading people's body language, I'm fairly sure you probably have used a printer to email documents out. It's a very quick way, so you don't get caught by physical security. You can scan out to file shares. You can scan out to cloud. You can get documents from various cloud services. Of course, then also, they are keeping all the credentials, if they're configured to do so, to these cloud services so that you can log on to them. Obviously, they'll integrate with Active Directory, so they're fully logged on to Active Directory, so that if you can compromise a printer, potentially, you can get an endpoint that's got a full list of all the AD objects. And you can also connect mobile phones and dedicated mobile apps in, and they'll have Bluetooth, and they'll have Wi-Fi. and they'll have network connections, and they'll probably have a modem in there if they're actually doing faxes. And I'm sure, and this didn't affect ours, but I'm sure you all saw at DEF CON last year with HP and Faxploit. Faxploit was really, really interesting. And hats off to the Checkpoint people for doing some superb research where they worked out some of the newer, extensions to the fax protocol for color fax machines would allow you to actually compromise the printer itself and actually jump from the phone line straight through onto the Ethernet network. Now, that's a scary, scary, scary proposition, that if you've got some of these things sitting on your network and you don't have a guarantee that you've got a modem sitting directly connected to your Ethernet network, well, that would concern me if I wasn't actually monitoring the security of it. Oh, they can also print as well. And a lot of people start to think about, if you print something out and therefore it becomes a physical data breach, is that actually the responsibility of the CISO? I mean, for example, in your organizations, if there was a printed material data breach, would you consider that to be under your responsibility, or would you say, no, that's facilities or that's physical security? Where would you say that would sit? You're a very talkative crowd. I like this. It's information. And there's an point here, which is, like it or lump it, the CISO is Chief Information Security Officer, not Chief Information Technology Security Officer or anything else but. So we have to kind of take these things seriously and have to start looking at this. And a long, long, long time ago, we used to have servers under desks. And it's funny, actually, because there's a yes, there's a bit of an anecdote that I have. I don't know, was anybody else in the room with Dave Lewis from Cisco, from Duosec yesterday? He was talking about data breaches where they found a router under a desk, and or under a floorboard. And I was talking to him afterwards about, I had a similar one where we found a server under a desk, and I powered it off because it was having some problems, and then discovered that actually it was a printing server, and managed to jam up about 200 trucks in southern Holland. But a printer is just that. It's a server that isn't stored in the server room. It's got all of these things. It may even have multiple amounts of file storage. It may even have RAID sitting in there. It's got all of these things. It's got an operating system. The operating systems on most printers, in fact, almost every single printer sitting out there today, is an operating system out there that you will know. It'll be one of two on the newer stuff, and I guarantee you'll know both operating systems. You can guess which two they are. And around 2017, there's a really good website here called hackingprinters.net. It's nothing to do with us, nothing to do with me, but I do like the website. They revealed that you can hack printers with PostScript commands. Now, a lot of people think of PostScript and think of it as a print format, and it kind of is, but it's so much more than that. PostScript is a total a scripting language. So you can actually write a document that has complete scripting language commands in there. So you can say, load this into memory, and if the next document that comes along to the printer contains the word Quentyn, Taylor, and demotion, change the D to promotion. And that's a completely valid thing. I mean, could you imagine having users emailing Perl scripts or emailing some scripting languages around and then executing them on hardware devices that maybe you don't run? Well, PostScript is very, very similar to that. And if you're not aware of what's going on, if you're not aware of, are you actually controlling this? Are you actually aware, are you verifying that the veracity of the documents floating around? This kind of stuff can happen. And this research, there was 2017, and we're now in 2019. But with all of those things going on, it's really, really, really easy to focus on the negative aspects. And what I want to talk to you today about is, and again, this is probably common across most of the different manufacturers, that there are huge areas where printers can actually add to your security arsenal. And if you've got to have them, you may as well sort out the security issues, but then actually turn them into a security bonus. So let's think about security bonuses. So this actually was a company I worked with, and they had a large number of people who would come in every couple of months to visit them. And they were flying in on airlines that didn't do online check-in. So they all had to print out boarding documents, and they had to print out different details, and so they needed to print out a lot of data when they came in. And they were actually creating Active Directory accounts just for printing. And so therefore what was happening was not enough AD accounts being created, and to be honest, you don't want to be creating large numbers of AD accounts for guest users. So what people were doing was they were emailing confidential data around. Eventually the company's CISO got involved and said, actually, I'm going to hire 2 people who are going to sit there with a computer each, and they're going to handle every single person's printing to get rid of the security issue, because that was considered by that CISO to be easier than actually generating all these Active Directory accounts. Well, you actually can turn on guest print, where you can just email documents in, and as long as you trust your email system, the printer picks them up from the email system and then sends a guest code through, and the user just literally walks up to the printer, types the guest code in, and gets their documents out. And they can't leave anything on the paper tray. Because things being found on the paper tray, I mean, who here, for example, has walked around a building and has found large amounts of data lurking on it? Yeah, I know, because that's just what you... And would you say that's one of the first places that you... Sorry, just if you weren't... Sharka's presentation yesterday was talking about red teaming and talking about... so talk to you about red teaming. But I imagine that's probably one of your greatest sources of information is go grab stuff off the paper tray. Exactamundo. So if you can stop stuff being left on the paper tray, and you can stop stuff being left on the paper tray for guests, isn't that a great thing? And if you can stop you having to create Active Directory accounts just for guests, isn't that a great thing? Well, yep. And it's right possible to do that there. Follow me printing is what we were talking about before. What I was talking about 2 seconds ago. If you've got printers and you're not logging on to the printer before you allow the users to print, you have a problem. I mean, if you just have it where you just have a print queue set up and you just press print and stuff just comes out the printer over there, you have a problem because people are going to print stuff and just not pick it up. People are going to print stuff. Printers do jam. Printers do run out of paper. Printers do run out of toner or whatever else. They're going to pick up half of their job, and then someone's going to come along, fix the printer, because no one ever bothers fixing a printer, but again, someone's going to fix the printer, and suddenly the rest of that print job's going to come out. Or worse than that, actually what happened in several UK councils is where 2 people send some very confidential print jobs, and someone picks up half the print job, and the other person picks up the other half of the print job, and they accidentally mix the print jobs up and send them to 2 different customers. And under European legislation, under GDPR, depending on what data was sent, that there is actually can be a significant data breach. So logging on to printers is a really, really it's your security 101. There's another one I'm coming to in hardening in a minute, but if you're doing your hardening, you want to be logging on to printers. You want to be logging on either with Active Directory or with some kind of RFID card or something else. And before I get on to the RFID card bit, just be aware of how your RFID cards are working. Anybody here familiar? Has anyone played with a Proxmark or anyone played around with... It's the usual suspects. Okay, so Proxmarks are you can grab on eBay. They just allow you to play around with RFID commands and play around with RFID cards. And often what we see with printers is when companies go in and they implement follow me printing with the badge enabled printing for the first time and they don't do it properly, they base the RFID or they base the security on the ID number of the card. Now, if all you're doing is basing the security on the ID number of the card, I can read and write My Fair Classic cards with my phone if I've got the right kind of writable magic card. So suddenly it means that I can pretend to be other people and I can break your security. So if you're going to do follow me printing, and please do follow me printing, and there's many, many ways you can do it, just make sure that if you're doing it with RFID in any way, shape or form, that you do make sure you test it and make sure it's being implemented in the correct way. Oh, I should say, by the way, as well, sorry, last bit on follow me printing is, it's one of these security controls that users love. And there aren't many security controls that users actually genuinely really, really love. And there's a reason why they love it is because if you move around a building, have you ever had it when you've moved around a building and you need to print something and you're going, oh, does anyone know what the print queue is for the printer over there? What's the number of that printer over there and what server it's sitting on? Well, with follow me printing, with any of the manufacturers, you just literally just press print and then you just log on. And when you log on, your print jobs come to that particular printer. So users love it and your service desks love it because they don't have to reconfigure print queues when users decide to move around the building. Hardening printers. So everyone here, or you may be familiar with a website called Shodan HQ. Basically just do, yeah, okay, I'm not going to go into too much detail. So Showdown, if you have a quick look on Showdown for port 9100, 9100 is the IPP, Internet Printing Protocol. Hey, it's got Internet and Printing Protocol. So you should have your Internet Printing Protocol should be on the Internet. If you want your printers to be on the Internet and you want people to be able to print your printers, yes, you can put them on the Internet. I did a search a couple of weeks ago, and I found over 250,000 printers sitting on the Internet. Now, remember what I said about this bit, about being able to hack printers via PostScript commands? Well, if you're putting your printers on the Internet, you've got to imagine, and you've got a PostScript interpreter, because a lot of those printers, I'll be really honest with you, of the 250,000 are going to be home printers, and they won't have a full-blown PostScript interpreter. So let's be really clear here. I'm not saying there's 250,000 vulnerable machines. But if you are putting your printers on the Internet, you've got to understand that the very best that can happen to putting printers on the Internet is that someone's going to print to it, and I'll come on to that in a second. But the very worst that can happen is that someone can actually send a malicious print job, potentially, and cause you serious problems. I'm not just talking about someone just printing pages and pages and pages of black like people used to do on the fax machines of old. I mean, people could actually potentially, on some other manufactured model of printer, they can actually overwrite chips, they can cause printers to go into permanent reboot loops, they can overwrite the firmware. There's a whole load of little things that can be done. But things like following a hardening guide is a really, really great example of getting in there and just saying, why do I have that turned on? Why do I have that? Because a printer is meant to be all things to all men, to all companies. And all manufacturers' printers are like this. In default configuration, they will come up with an awful lot of ports, a lot of protocols, a lot of stuff. And if you don't need it to be there, why on earth would you leave it to be there? And the problem is a lot of times it's facilities has configured it, or facilities has brought somebody else in, and then you as a security professional maybe didn't get involved. So go grab a hardening guide, because if you don't... So this was from 2000 and... Is there a date on here? There's not. I'm going to say 2017, because I can't think of when it was. So this was 2017, where someone sent print jobs. They basically just scanned Showdown, or whatever they wanted to use. Maybe you've used mass scan. And literally, they'd connected to everything that was sitting on port 9100 and sent this lovely picture through. So from Stack Overflow online at tutor.io, I hacked your printer. Basically, this person was just trying to tell people, please, don't connect printers to the Internet. And you might notice something unusual, that this, you look at the bit of paper here, that isn't A4. No, that's a receipt printer that was connected to the Internet. A receipt printer connected to the Internet. So you'd have thought that after this person sent this lovely warning, nice friendly warning, even with a MechWarrior reference, which I just liked. The MechWarrior reference is part of my childhood. You'd have thought people wouldn't have done it anymore. People would have turned it off. Well, actually, just fast forward through to the end of 2018, where someone by the name of Hacker Giraffe, who I suspect is English based upon his language, actually put a thing up. There was something about T-Series and PewDiePie to what they call two YouTubers who were having some kind of battle to see who could get to #1 in terms of wherever it was. And he was just, or he or she, to be honest, was sending around huge amounts of prints saying, please subscribe to PewDiePie, that was it, and unsubscribe from T-Series. And this person did it 3 or 4 times. And literally, people were saying, all these printers have been hacked. And it's like, no, they haven't. These are just printers that are sitting there on the Internet. All the person did was connect to port 9100 and just send it a print job. And the printer accepted the print job and printed it. And you'll be surprised at how many corporates suddenly went, my God, my printers are on the Internet. And remember, these are the printers that handle everything from people printing their pay slips, to printing salary letters, to printing sensitive data. And there's that PostScript thing I talked about. And yet people are still in 2019 sitting printers on the Internet, and maybe you're not aware of it. Of those 200,000 people who have got the printers that are sitting on the Internet, I don't think a large percentage of them meant to be on the Internet. So, what's my call to action here? If you recognize there's a risk here, you need to take action. And what you need to do when you're taking action, well, the first thing is actually say, well, how are mine configured? I mean, does everybody here, do you do like a regular scan through your corporate network just to see what on earth has suddenly appeared on the inside? Yeah? Does everyone do that? I do, because it's fun. Some at the back does. We like people at the back do these things. Because one day, actually, about 2 years ago, I even found the system that this gentleman down here is using to control all of this lot. And then, much to my amusement, I discovered that I could actually make the screens in the boardroom go up and down and the curtains in the boardroom close. And I could do it from a different building. And I was playing with it, and then someone said, could you stop doing this, please? Because people don't ask. Your internal facility people won't ask. People will go and plug their IoT coffee machine in. They will plug things in, and they have been plugging printers and various other things into your corporate networks for years, and you need to be aware of them. Because they can be a risk, and as I've said as well, they can also be an advantage, but you've got to recognize that you've got this issue. And so what can you actually do? Well, the first thing is actually assess them. I mean, I'm sure all of you have got test networks or test labs, or you can just plug one into the corporate LAN next to your PC and just port scan it and just have a look. I mean, if you're going to run printers, just ask the manufacturer or whoever's installing your print network to say, I'm just going to scan it when it comes in. And if your print manufacturer or company installed in the network says, oh, I don't want you to do that, well, maybe you want a different one, because they should turn around and say, please go ahead. We've followed this hardening guide. This is how we've actually set this up. And look at the applications that are running on the whole print network and start working out what is it, what do they do, how are they actually sending data around, and what's the security model? How do they fail? Does this fail open or does this fail closed? Does it fail in the way that I want it to fail? And don't actually, I'll come on to this here, manufacturer is no guarantee of quality. I mentioned this here. I, a long time ago, was dealing with a lock manufacturer who I don't want to mention. But they're a big, big lock manufacturer, very recognizable global brand. And they just installed locks in our data center and the design criteria of the data center was it was a lights out data center, so therefore you had to be able to unlock the locks from our security location, which was about 20 kilometers away. So security could see my face, they could then check to make sure I had authorization, they could press a button or click an icon, and suddenly the lock would unlock and I could go in. And what we discovered is if you port scanned the lock, because it was on the internal network, again, facilities didn't ask, the lock would actually fail open. It would actually reboot. It would actually crash, reboot. And of course, a lock on a data center, you don't want it in a crashed state to be locked. You want it to unlock just in case there's a fire or something else that's caused the crash. But in actual fact, that was a major manufacturer of locks, and that was actually no guarantee of quality. But anyway, what can you do? Well, understand that one size doesn't fit all. The manufacturer is probably trying to create that IoT device, not just printers, but all the IoT devices, to meet all of the individual office requirements of all of the individual customers that they may ever want to send it into. So you're going to have a quick look and say, what decisions have they made, and does that meet what I want? And I mean, actually assess it. Don't just read the documents. Read the documents is great, but actually assess it. Actually port scan it. Actually run your pen testing tools against it. Actually ask your red teamers or maybe not red teamers maybe, but more your audit team to say, hey, could you just run your fuzzer through there and could you just have a bit of a play and just give that a bit of poke and prod and just make sure it does what I want it to do. And look at the network traffic the device is sending. Don't assume that the manufacturer is right when they say all of our packets are encrypted. Go and have a look. Are they actually encrypted? Because we tested something, an IoT device, an office IoT device, and we discovered that no, not all of the data was encrypted. Actually, all the signaling information wasn't encrypted, which was great because it meant that, yes, I couldn't see the actual data, but I did know who was sending it and when they were sending it and the velocity and everything else, and I could just read it off in plain text, which in reality was probably all I actually needed. I didn't need to know what the content of the data was. I just needed to know who was talking to who. And we only found that out from looking at the network traffic, and then when you report it to the manufacturer, they go, ah, yeah, we'll fix that in the next version. Do this device discovery in your network, because users won't ask for permission. I scanned my home network the other day because I'd lost something. I thought I'll be intelligent here and I'll scan it. And I had 46 devices come back. Yeah, it turned out my au pair was actually, well, my au pair, sorry, my kid's au pair, sorry, I don't have an au pair. My kid's au pair had like 4 mobile devices and even had what they called, a VPN proxy running permanently. We picked a decent au pair. I didn't know whether to be shocked or surprised or really, really proud. I was kind of proud of her to do that because she was routing all of her TV through it. I asked her if she just wanted to move it into the pseudo server room and not run it in the bedroom. We don't run under the desk servers at home in my house either. And also just work out which of your devices have got business critical data. It's really, really easy to not actually map out your business process and just assume and work out, just think it's all going everywhere and not realize where the business critical data is. And a really true story here was we were testing one of our internal printers, and we bought a brand new one, and I needed, the design criterion was, I wanted a brand new one out of the case, out of the packing case, and we were going to test it for something because we wanted to make guaranteed sure it had never been configured before, so that all the data on there was clean data and was our data. So we ran some tests on the Thursday, got a bit late. We went home, came back in again on the Friday, ran some final tests, pulled the hard drives out, and started doing some forensics work just to verify, to get a clean baseline of what data was there. And then we found a whole load of HR data, and we panicked, because we were sitting there going, no. This came clean out of our supply chain. There's no way that HR data can be on there. And then it turned out that we'd left it in an unlocked room overnight. And someone from HR had been wandering along and had decided to beat their print quotas because they'd found a printer that wasn't locked, that was just not configured, and they just photocopied a load of people's CVs and stuff. And of course, when we ran the test the next morning, we found it. We didn't know business critical data was sitting on that printer because it shouldn't have been, but you never know. It will get into places that you don't expect it to be, and you've got to test it. But finally, what I want to get to here is, don't forget the positives. There are risks. There are risks in all of the Office IoT, but they're all manageable. They've all been thought of. They've all been there. But a lot of companies don't think about it, and it just takes one of you lot to go back into your office on Monday, do some testing, do some scanning, and then start reaching out to people and going, look, why is that stuff sending plain text data onto the internet? Why is that not configured in this way? Why is that not done in the right way? Hang on a second, there's a better way of doing this, and suddenly you can improve the world. There are resources there. There are hardening guides. There are documents to explain these are the possibilities that you've got. And really, really small differences, just getting to make sure that you understand where your data is and making sure that people are logging onto the printers suddenly can change everything that's going on. So I want to leave it with this, which is the future's in your hands. And I was at a conference and someone said, you represent a manufacturer, so why don't you just do this by default? And I said, oh, that's great, yes. Well, you represent consumers. Now, why don't the manufacturers of consumer products just do this by default? Because manufacturers will only change if you, the customers here, push them to. So please, get angry. Start pushing and start saying, I want security here, I want security by default, and I want these things in. So thank you, everybody. I'm here for today, and I think I'm around a little bit tomorrow. I'm on Quentyn blog on Twitter. I talk about not just print security, but a lot of bits about security there. And then that's my corporate email at the bottom. I'm happy to answer any questions. I'm happy to answer any questions on Twitter or corporate email. And if you've got any questions about Office IoT, print security, document management, or anything else, and I'll be really honest with you, I'm not a salesperson. Might be quite evident by my presentation style. So I'm happy to answer any questions now or happy to answer any questions later on. Thank you, everybody. Oh, we have one question just down here.
Are Office IoT manufacturers and printers, are they getting into bug bounties? So are there going to be like bug bounties for printers? Is that something that's been looked at?
Some of them are, yes. Okay, so we've been talking about it under the hood. It's getting there. It's not there consistently at this moment in time across all different areas, which is a bit of a shame, actually. I think it's more on the consumer stuff, it's quite popular. But on the Office IoT, it's not there yet, which is a bit of a shame. Nope.
I wanted to ask, so did you mention that if there is something being printed and they don't pick it up, it's being discarded, or? Because that's just something that might be a good future. So like what you have on an ATM, if the money gets distributed and someone doesn't pick it out, it goes back, which I'm just saying something that will make my work harder, but it might be maybe good future.
So I also have asked the same question. And what we've realized is if you implement follow me printing, so you force the users to log on, and only when they log on does the print job come out, it kind of resolves the problem enough so that you don't need to implement the shredder underneath. And you don't need to do follow me printing with actually logging on with an ID card. You can do it logging on with Active Directory. You can do logging on with biometrics. You can log on with your face. So as you approach the printer, it just suddenly logs on as you. There's all these different options. So there's so many options of how to log on that I agree, but by implementing that other control, which gives you a whole load of other benefits, you don't need to implement the relatively expensive control of a built-in shredder. Although it would be a really cool thing to build.
Thanks.
Okay, thank you, everybody. And I think I'm just leaving enough time for the next presenter. Thank you, everyone.